In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a sort of cloudy, overcast day, warm, humid, a little bit gloomy out there. Dry enough that I'll need to water the plants. More or less everything from Rolling Acres Garden is now out the back of the church here, which makes it look really rather pretty. I quite like it, and I'll be able to go and sit out there at lunchtime, have lunch and so on, and maybe even have people out there as well. Good morning, Helia. I don't think anybody else except you and I are around at the moment, but there we go. I'm going backwards and forwards to Rolling Acres and to the Nest. Good morning, Joan. At the moment, good morning, Anton. And taking things from there and cleaning each room as I go, and then taking it off to the Nest or the window box. I'm not quite sure which. It's smaller than Rolling Acres, and I call that Rolling Acres, so maybe we ought to have some posh name for it, like the Manor or something. It's really quite a small flat. Good morning, Stella. Yes, us to you as well. And Joan, filling a cake with fresh strawberries. I've seen some absolutely magnificent ones that you've done. Good morning, Rob, from Wales. Yeah, Rob mentions Gary there. Both of them came from the same part of the country. There's Gary. I don't know if you noticed, Gary, but your videos had more than 350 viewers so far, and well over 10% of those have said they liked it. So that's a really good thing. Okay, time I got on with this, otherwise we're spending the whole time in chit-chat and talking about strawberries and cakes and plants and moving and other things like that. A big wave from the back country. It was lovely. It's nice having you here, it really was good. Okay, verse chapter 20. We're on a new chapter today. Chapter 20, verses 1 to 8. Now it happened on one of those days, as he taught the people in the temple and preached the gospel, that the chief priests and scribes, together with the elders, confronted him and spoke to him, saying, "Tell us, by what authority are you doing these things? Or who is he who gave you this authority?" But he answered and said to them, "I also ask you one thing, and answer me. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men?" And they reasoned among themselves, saying, "If we say, from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But if we say, from men, all the people will stone us, for they are persuaded that John was a prophet." So they answered that they did not know where it was from. And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." Okay. Well, it starts off, you won't be surprised to know, because it's Luke with K egenito, and it came to pass. Luke only uses this 64 times in the Gospel and 54 times in Acts of the Apostles. And it's one of those really definitive ways of knowing that Luke wrote something. So if you found something, another letter or something that had that all the way through, you'd be pretty sure that it was likely to be St. Luke, or at least somebody who spent a lot of time with him and picked up his speech patterns. Unfortunately, many translations in English, they don't translate it as "and it came to pass" or "and then it happened." So you don't get this little stylistic thing made clear to you when you're reading it in English. But in Greek, it's very, very obvious. Anyway, on one of those days, we know from Matthew and Mark that it was Tuesday of Great and Holy Week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days or so before the Lord is going to be crucified. And a lot is going on at this point, and a huge amount of opposition. And the Lord doesn't answer them directly all the way through, but he tells parables, tells stories, does things that makes it obvious where he thinks his authority comes from. That happens all the way through until chapter 21, verse 4 or 5, 4 I think it is. As he taught, okay, so this is Tuesday, and we get him saying, not answering directly, but answering indirectly where his authority has come from. So what's he doing there? Now, as it happened on one of those days, as he taught the people in the temple and preached the gospel. Okay? So number one, he's teaching the laos, the people. This is the ordinary everyday folk. Not posh people, not learned people, not priests, not scribes, not Pharisees, not Sadducees, just ordinary everyday folk. And these ordinary everyday folk seem to be lapping up what he is saying to them. And he does two things, you note. It's not just a stylistic thing that Luke is doing here. He's pointing out that the Lord is doing two things. The first one is this. He taught the people in the temple. Okay? He taught. As a teacher, he's explaining to those people new things about the gospel so they learn things within it. And within a parish, you always have to keep on teaching everybody, teaching and so on, and bringing people up so that they can exceed your own knowledge. This is what I'm doing now. And that basic teaching is a really important part of what every Christian person has to do. So you do it to your children, you do it to your friends, relations, other people around you, mainly by the way that you live, but also if they ask a question, and you can, and we'll talk about this later, you answer it directly. The second thing he's doing is this, and preach the gospel. Now that is not the same as teaching. Preaching and teaching are two different activities. You know, very often you go to churches where people don't have the gospel preached to them. They just get lots of teaching. They get teaching about God, but there's something about they teach about God, but there's something about preaching that introduces people to God. When you preach about the gospel, and when you proclaim the gospel, it's a better word really here, when you proclaim the gospel, then the idea is it should sink into people, and they should then come to have the relationship with God that is direct. So it's not something mediated through somebody else, it's direct. When you're teaching, you might be, for instance, when you're preaching, you might be talking about Christ having risen from the dead, trampling down death upon those in the tombs, bestowing life. And this is something you too can have. Okay, so that's preaching. Teaching might be, well, how do we pray? How do we get on pray? Why might we fast? Okay, and then people are actually taught how to pray, how to fast, why we fast, and so on. And you can see the way those are two very, somewhat different things. And both of them are important for someone or other who's wanting others to know the gospel, to internalize the gospel, to have Jesus Christ nestling in their heart, more than nestling in their heart, with their hearts, as it says in the anaphora. The priest comes out and says, let us lift up our hearts. Better really is let us lift our hearts to the Lord, and the people then say, we have them with the Lord. That is the better translation. And having our hearts with the Lord and taking our hearts, as it were, ourselves to God all the time is a really important part of what we're trying, people like me are trying to have me and also other people to do. Okay? So it's not a question of controlling other people. It's a way of breaking open the gospel for them in a way that I and other people can receive Christ into ourselves. Okay, so he was teaching and he was preaching. And at that moment, along come the chief priests and scribes together with the elders, and they confront him. So this is not one of those things where they're wanting to hear the gospel. They don't. They're not wanting to understand better about God. They don't. They come along to confront, and they are confronting God. So they've already stood in judgment on God, and they decided that he is worthy of their confrontation. What a shocking and frightening thing that is. But there are an awful lot of people who, on the great day of judgment, will stand before God and judge God. Actually say to God, you are not worthy of me. And this is exactly what it is that these chief priests and scribes together with the elders are doing. Now, those people, these fine folk, the chief priests, scribes, the experts in the law, that means, and the presbytery, the elders of the people, these are some new characters. We've just had them just now, but these are new characters really, and most of the other story is about them. Now, what are they going to do? He's met with the Pharisees, now he's meeting with them. They're learning the sacrifices in the temple, the services that have had in the temple. Remember, these are temple people, not synagogue people. They're like you have in Christianity denominations. So you had something similar within Judaism. You had those who were built around the synagogue, the Pharisees et al., the rabbis and others. And you had those who were around the temple. And they taught slightly different, somewhat different things, in fact. And they didn't tend to like each other much. When the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, they destroyed the temple, and effectively they destroyed all that side of Judaism. And that's why it is that Judaism now is something we associate with rabbis and synagogues and so on. Basically, the Pharisees won out. They were able to continue Judaism, whereas the Sadducees, the priests and the scribes and others, what they believed and how they did things actually was largely destroyed. Okay, so they're learning their sacrifice, their services, all of that point towards Christ, but they can't see it when they see him. When they hear about what he's done, when they see what he's doing, when they hear what he's teaching and preaching, then they reject him. That's basically what it means here. They confront him. And they come along, and you can imagine them bustling along. Hey, you, by what authority? And they would have been frightfully posh. Terribly far back, you know. I say, my man, by what authority are you teaching and preaching these things? Like doing these things? One of the things he's been doing, of course, is that, good morning, Bev, and good morning, Tony, is that he's been cleaning the temple. And that by itself should have been enough to tell them this is a possible Messiah. But they're not interested in that bit there. Okay? By what authority are you doing this? Or who gave you, by who, what man? Who is it who gave you this authority? All right? And that is really important. Now, we have to say that nowadays, people like me stand firmly with my feet in the shoes of the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. And when we see things going on, we have to be very careful, people like me, but anybody really who's very sure of the teaching that they have, that they are not they're not condemning the Lord and the Lord's word, because it doesn't seem to come from the same authority. Now, the Lord was not accepted by the Pharisees. He was not a trained rabbi. He might have been, actually, but we don't think he was. He was not accepted by the priests, although there were priests in his family. He himself is not a priest or a Levite. He is not a scribe, and he's not one of the elders of the people. So it's rather like saying that he's not an ordained Orthodox priest, like me, or a bishop of the Orthodox Church, or a reader, or a subdeacon, or somebody or other who's had authority given to him in order to teach, preach, take services, and so on and so on. And then you see something happening somewhere else, maybe another denomination, or another religion. And it is important not to start off by condemning whatever it is you see. Even the Lord said, those are not against us, for us. And in this case here, those people who had all the authority that God could give them got it terribly, terribly wrong. And sometimes we have to use our authority to stand back. My father was a United Nations expert, and when I was a teenager, and we used to tease him by calling him the expert and say, "Dad, what does the expert think about this?" My father would look very patiently and tell us to shut up. But one day I said to him, "What does it actually mean to be an expert?" And he said something I think is really important. He said, "Well, an expert is somebody who has the authority to know that we don't know." And I really like that. And I think that was a very good answer, and something that actually, the more expert you are, the better it is to stand back and say, I don't know yet. I'm going to stand back and just watch. I'm going to look, I'm going to watch, I'm going to test this in my mind and see whether it's from God. And quite often it is. You go to some radically different type of Christian church, you meet some radically different sort of Christian teacher or preacher, and you listen to him or her and you think, actually, you know what, they've got it. And that's a really important thing to think, really important. Because often you can see that although somebody might not have the Catholics like this thing about the apostolic succession. Well, Orthodox are less impressed by that. We have it, but we're less impressed by it. You have to be part of the church to be part of the church. But that's a different thing. Oh, hello, Jovan. How lovely to see you. Ages. Anyway, everything's going well where you are. In Tanzania, from what I remember. Okay, you look, you listen, you learn, and maybe you see that something radically different is actually directly from the hand of God, more though than anything you might have given. Okay. Verse 5. Carry on going rather. But Jesus answered and said to them, "I also ask you one thing, and answer me. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men?" And I don't need to explain that, because you see what they're saying to themselves. And they reason among themselves. It's where we get the word logical from. And they thought logically amongst themselves. Morning, Christina. They did logarithmics amongst themselves. They reason among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, you'll say, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from men, all the people stone us, for they are persuaded that John was a prophet. So the answer, they did not know where it was from. So, the baptism of John, where is that from? From men? Was it something he had constructed himself? Or did it come from God? Now, this is very similar to something that happened back in chapter 7, verse 29. And there what happens is, although the tax collectors and others are rejoicing about what the Lord has said about John the Forerunner and Baptist, the Pharisees rejected because they had not been baptized by John. They rejected John. So here we have a sort of mirror. Okay, Pharisees back then, chapter 7. Now in chapter 20, it's the Sadducees, the priests, the elders, the scribes, to reject the Lord this time. They rejected. So in other words, they're rejecting both. And for the same reason, actually, they say nothing because they're fearful of getting stoned as well. Now, the church fathers say something interesting. I think it's Eusebius, but I'm not writing that down here. They are not prepared either to look for the truth or to stand up for it. And that's a shocking thing, isn't it? They're not prepared to look for the truth. They're not prepared to stand up for it. For instance, let us say really that they think that the baptism of John came from men. Then as teachers of Israel, they should have said, we think it came from men. And the consequences would be that people hurl stones at them. But at least that is a thoroughly moral way of behaving. That's the right thing to do. On the other hand, let us say, they might have said, we're not certain, but there are lots of things about John we really like. For instance, his call for purity, his call for repentance. But he himself, a bit dodgy about him, and that is also a decent thing to do. And so we're still looking into the whole work and life of John. And of course we have to bear in mind that Herod cut his head off. And I'm fond of having my head on my shoulders. So we're still looking into it. At least you got some sort of decent answer from that. And either of those would be an answer the Lord could work with. Either of them are. But instead they take the coward's way out. They say, in verse 7, so they answer, they did not know where it was from. They're not prepared to stand up for the truth or to seek it out. Rather shocking. And then we have verse 8. This is an interesting way of answering questions that are not being asked honestly, in a confrontational way. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. You don't have to tell anybody something. You don't have to. Let's see what St. Bede says about this. St. Bede says, because they will not confess that which they know, they were baffled, and the Lord would not tell them what he knew. There are two reasons, says St. Bede, why we should conceal the truth from those that ask. There's another bit of a surprise. There are two reasons why we can conceal the truth from those who ask. One, when the questioner is incapable of understanding what he is asking. And two, when from hatred or contempt he is unworthy to have his questions answered. Well, that second one is quite easy to answer. That's what these elders and priests and co are doing. Okay, they're not worthy of having their question answered, so the Lord is not answering it. They're asking it through contempt and hatred. But the first one there is also interesting. When the questioner is incapable of understanding what he asks. I remember some years ago, I was watching a documentary about the church in Ethiopia. And this reporter went to Ethiopia and while he was there, he saw all sorts of interesting things. And eventually he had an interview with the patriarch, the Coptic patriarch, the Ethiopian patriarch in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. And he asked him a question. And the question was an absurd one. And the patriarch said to him, "You're not asking the right sort of question, so I cannot answer your question." And the reporter turned to the camera and said, "The patriarch doesn't want to answer my question." Okay? That's not what the patriarch said. The patriarch was answering exactly the way that St. Bede is talking about here. The questioner was incapable of understanding what he was asking. And therefore, there's no way that the patriarch could answer him. Ask a different question. The question you're asking, you don't understand it. I'll give you some questions you might like to ask that are much simpler than the one you asked and are not born out of trying to trick me. So ask a different sort of question, then I can answer it. And this reporter went off feeling pretty ruffled actually by this experience, and certainly justifying himself and raising himself up above the level of the patriarch. And you could see also the way that other people who were not Christian, who would not understand that way, the patriarch had answered in this very subtle way, would not have very subtle, very interesting way. They would not have answered. They would have taken the reporter's understanding of that as well. Right. Well, there are some people to pray for today, but before that, somebody's trying to phone me. It's Terry. Before that, let's see what people are saying and if there are any questions that I can answer. Let's have a look. So, I can see more people turning up. I think I got to Tony. Morning, Tony. Gary is saying I had a better accent than his. I love your accent, Gary. It's beautiful. It's lovely and warm, rich, warm accent. Mind you, I grew up for a long time with people who spoke with similar accent, mainly sort of Redditch, Bromsgrove accent, also the Worcester accent, which is genuinely sort of deep, rich farmer, that is, the only Worcester. And what does Brother Rob say? And my accent, I'm originally from the Scott Arms, Walsall, Birmingham border. I live in Wales and done so 14 years. Well, Katoki in Tanzania, yeah, that's where you are, Jovan. God bless you and keep you. You're going well. I hope you're enjoying it very much. I must say, a large part of me is very envious. I'd love to be in Tanzania, really. I love living in Zambia. I liked visiting and living in Kenya as well. Though Somalia took, where I was in Somalia wasn't bad, and I spent most of my time down to the beach. Scott Arms, clearly a good place. Newtown, Mid Wales, let me know, we all have a chat and a cup of tea. Actually, Rob, that reminds me, there's a young man also who came here called Owen, who lives in Welshpool, who apparently would be more than happy to give you a lift anytime you wanted one to the Orthodox Church in Shrewsbury. Good morning, Frank. It's my privilege, Frank, to do this. It really is. And it's lovely to see you there. God bless you. Anton says, always amazed by John's diet, eating wild honey and locusts. Yeah, it's a symbolic food that he's eating there. So wild honey is obviously sweet, though it has a sting in the tail, but it's sweet. And in Greek, the word for honey is mele, and the word for locust is akridos, from which we get the word acrid in English. So it was mellifluous, what he said. It was sweet and good to hear, and it was akridos, acrid to hear, acidic, and difficult to hear. And really, when John the Forerunner Baptist spoke, people either heard what he was saying and heard it as something as sweet and beautiful, or acrid and disgusting. They didn't want it. And you see this all the way through. Same with the Lord here. The laos, the people, they're lapping up what he's saying. For them it's wonderful. But the priests, the Pharisees, and all those guys, when they hear it, they hate it. It's acrid to them. And the same is true with John the Forerunner Baptist. So his food was prophetic about how people would observe what came out of his mouth, the same as what went into his mouth. Okay? Not sure how well you do nowadays if you only ate locusts and wild honey, but there we are. Carl, another Warsaw boy. Ay, ay, ay. What do people say? Christina, God bless you. I shared the video with several people. Yeah, I think people love that video. Being at a Christian school with such lovely young African students is a rare joy. Yes, it is. I found excerpts of a diary that I'd written when I was packing Rolling Acres, me writing when I was 22, and just the feelings that I could smell that red laterite soil in Zambia, and I could smell the inside of the chapel and what the inside of the school felt like, and that dustiness of the chalk and all that sort of stuff. It was wonderful. Right, well, good morning, Patrick, God bless you. That's enough for today, I think. So if you could remember, please, to pray for Barbara. I saw Barbara yesterday. Yesterday I was at Steve's funeral. It was very sad to have to, we didn't take part. It was a Quaker funeral. It was very interesting and actually rather beautiful. And the Quaker place of burial was also absolutely lovely little site. We were able to pray with them and pray for Steve and pray for Barbara. They had a long and very loving marriage, and now that the funeral has taken place, I suspect that Barbara will feel very, very empty, because you get to a point where there's nothing more you can do for the person you love. You've done it all. You buried them. Obviously, you need to pray and so on and do memorial services, but there's a sudden feeling, I've done everything I can, and now what do I do? So please pray for her. That's Barbara. And for Simon, son of Dino, and Elizabeth, daughter of Christina, and Judy, of course, and Erin's Joseph. Pray for them today. And then keep each other in your prayers. I will get on with that little job for you today, Gary. So hopefully you'll be hearing before very long. Okay? Meanwhile, God willing, tomorrow we will meet again. I can see that there are more things coming in. Yeah, poor Barbara. Yeah, keep her in your prayers, please. Okay, let me just remember how to switch this on. I'm doing it a different way nowadays. If you want to see what this looks like, if you look on the bit on YouTube that says community, you can see two very nice pictures that Gary took. Gary is a photographer, and you could see that actually. When he was doing things, he was taking pictures of different things. So he said, "Oh, stop, just wait there a moment, Father, the light's just right." Saying, just right for what? God bless you all. Oh, more things, Brother Rob, going to pray for Barbara. Thank you very much. God bless you, keep you.